never, never, and never again shall it be that this beautiful land will again experience the oppression of one by another.
The expectation was that this institution will help to sustain the hard-fought democracy, to ensure that we do not relapse to what happened in the past, to see to it that government with its state organs, the private sector as well, will respect human rights and will help inculcate the culture of human rights.
The best way of understanding the mandate of the Commission is you have a grand promise in terms of the Constitution. You have a social contract between the state and citizens. And our responsibility as a Chapter 9 institution is to ensure that the state delivers on its promise.
The Human Rights Commission became a body we came up with as an effort to infuse our country, to induct our country, to say we do need to work on this creation of a human rights culture. It's now 20 years. It's like it was yesterday.
We were a mixture of people. And that's what made the Commission truly exciting place to work in, is that we acknowledged that we came from different sources and different backgrounds, were shaped by different aspects of the history, social and political history of our country, and we were not uniform in the way we thought.
The very first year I joined the Commission, our budget was so small. I think we had about 7 million, and in my department I only had 1 or 2 staff members to monitor the whole country, national level, provincial level, as well as local government.
In the early days when I joined the Human Rights Commission, it was more about establishing the Human Rights Commission itself as an institution and making sure that there is access to the Human Rights Commission by the people and developing the systems that needed to be in place for the Human Rights Commission to be able to function and function adequately.
It was never expected that the state would deliver on all its promises overnight. It was always anticipated that it would be a progression, it would take time, it would take money. Now, Chapter 9 institutions are there, and the Human Rights Commission in particular is there to ensure that it happens at the pace at which the economy, the budget is able to equip the government to deliver on its promises.
Apart from having a new government, the South Africa of the 27th of April looked very much the same as it had always looked for the last 50 years or so. And so one was then dealing with realpolitik, as it were, the reality of then converting this wonderful promise of human rights into reality.
I'm part of a process, I'm part of an organization that can definitely bring about major changes.
Ingxaki kwakuyile nto sasingenayitoilet esingenanto apha. Kokoko usuka ngo-92 nje bazokwenzela itoilet ngoku lezi ezihluphayo futhi nazo ezingekho right ncam. Bloka zenza yonke into kanti mayibloka apha ingena apha ezindlini. Besingene itoilet lezi apha kula bantu abanetoilet esicele kuwo ngamanye amaxesha siye ematyholweni.
One of the first cases that we dealt with was in relation to the unenclosed toilets in the Western Cape and then the unenclosed toilets in the Free State. And taking up those complaints was wildly unpopular.
Some of the rights enshrined in the Constitution are subject to availability of resources. Some of the rights have to be progressively realized. And it has been a challenge for the Commission as well as for government to explain this to the public.
Is that door always open like that?
It's always open like in the weekend, yeah.
Yeah?
The Tutsi room comes from there's a tavern down here.
There's a tavern down that side, and they're using their toilets?
Yeah, also using that toilet.
When we started with the cases around toilets in the Cape Town, in the Free State and all over. Take for instance, you go to Khayelitsha where it's just sand and it's an informal settlement and you find there's no toilet and you ask yourself, how does people help themselves in such a situation? It's quite depressing.
Informal settlements continue to be treated as temporary. People who have lived for 15, even more than 20 years are still seen as temporary. And this is how government has continued to provide services. They continue to provide temporary services such as chemical toilets, portable toilets, bucket toilets and container toilets.
Do you use that toilet at night?
Yes, you see, when you are like this, sometimes your stomach is running.
Yeah.
You must get up and go there at night, and I'm afraid. Okay. Or I must use the bucket.
But wa ka 2011 ane re kenya application complaint ya rona o batho ba Human Rights Commission. Ka 2013 hoba nako tsene re fihla mo ba ile ba re jwetsa ka nnete bo mme le bontate ba Human Rights Commission hore ba tshwere cases tse ka fetang 1000 se tsa member di etse empa re be tshepo ra re tla be tshepo ho lona hoba go ne se re mathile hohle ho sena nko etswang le mina so ina re a se ba kene taba tsa rona na ra qala jwalo ka bona bo dipompo o qala ho kena pompo tse tharo le ho tjena se re na le tse 6.
As I'm doing my site visit in the township, I find a 3-year-old child relieving herself in the middle of a street in broad daylight. It takes away from human dignity, that's the bottom line. You know, it wasn't like a mushrooming or informal settlement. It's been there for a long time. Again, people have been forgotten.
In the hearings, and this has been the experience with all our hearings, people will stand up and say, we've tried many avenues, we're coming here because we trust that the Commission will do something about this. And so it's on the basis of that trust that the Commission has to hold governments accountable.
It is totally unacceptable. On the one hand, you sing and laud a Bill of Rights as a masterpiece of our Constitution. But to give teeth to it, it tells a different story.
We have achieved a lot in terms of the technical framework, you know, the written frameworks, the laws, the policies, the programs that we have on paper. I think the weakness of the new democracy has been on delivery.
Andiboni into inkululeko ikhona uba khona kodwa akho into eshintshileyo ngoba sina ngokuhlala endlini elo hlobo.
The way politicians continue to act where they only come where there's going to be elections. And you can see and you can hear from people who we've talked to that people are sick and tired of that they have to vote each and every year, but nothing really changes. This is why you see the violent protest where people burn tires because of this anger, of this frustration, of trying to engage for so many years with government, but nothing happens.
We would like to send a clear message to other municipalities in the province and throughout the country that the Commission should be taken seriously. We are not an NGO, we are not a civil society group, we are a constitutional body and we deserve to be accorded the respect we deserve as an institution supporting democracy.
We have the ability to have the ear of the President on issues relating to key decision makings in this country. We have the access to the Speaker of Parliament based purely on our constitutional establishment to advise on law reform, any critical matters that the country is facing.
There's a heightened consciousness about people's rights, about the need to take the issue of rights of people seriously. And the Human Rights Commission has played a big role in that respect. And we in Parliament, of course, welcome institutions supporting democracy. They certainly have been supporting the oversight role of Parliament.
Members of the judiciary.
We similarly have access to the judiciary. And I think that the Commission has not utilize the opportunity to have very direct and dynamic relationships with all three organs of state.
The Commission is one of the most valuable institutions in our country, to promote and protect human rights. But it's also so sad that so few people know of the existence of the Human Rights Commission, and I was one of those.
The need for a set of institutions that is independent of government to support democracy, to ensure that that promise is delivered on, was particularly crucial for South Africa. The vast majority of people in South Africa had been excluded from the economy, had been excluded from political participation. And in the new democracy, the imperative for citizens to get involved in government, to enjoy civil and political rights and have a voice, but also the kind of government that protects them, was crucial.
I still remember very clearly, no, not very clearly, fairly clearly, the origin of the idea of a Human Rights Commission. And the main thrust of the debates and arguments was over a Bill of Rights generally enforced by the courts. But many of us were saying the Constitutional Court can't deal with the myriads of issues.
In a NGO environment, like-minded people come together with a common vision and a common sense of what they want to do. The Human Rights Commission was different. Parliament had appointed a diverse group of people from diverse backgrounds with different priorities as to what they thought was important. And so for an institution like that, the need to try and find consensus amongst people who were committed to human rights, but who may have had their own priorities, was indeed a difficult task at the beginning. So I think the early years were about trying to come together as a team.
Both sides, including the liberation movement people and the apartheid government, did not have this culture of being held to account. And we had to slowly build this culture of accountability because, respect for human rights goes along with accountability.
Whenever that particular spirit took hold within the Human Rights Commission, regardless of who our adversaries were, that spirit of let's sit down and talk and find a solution was something that always served us well.
I remember a lot of times we used to subpoena some very high names and they will take it personal. I remember somebody said to me, I thought we were friends. Why are you serving with a subpoena? I said, no, it's not about friendship. It's just about me doing my work, what is there in the Constitution.
We do what we call inspections in local. So we go to the village, talk to the community, ask their experiences. When we go there, I don't go there dressed like this. We have to put on takis and sneakers. You have to wear comfortable clothes.
When I come to these villages, I see a lot of suffering from the people in the villages. I feel privileged coming from the urban area. And it is one of those reasons that I feel that even though there is democracy in South Africa, we are yet not equal.
You already have community-based organizations on the ground. You already have non-governmental organizations with footprint in communities. I think the Commission could achieve more by using the networks that these institutions already have in communities to leverage the message that we want to get across.
Several years ago, we identified that the Eastern Cape was in a particularly dire situation. There were stockouts of the most basic medicines. People couldn't even get Panado. Oxygen was not being transported to hospitals. Hospitals didn't have water, they didn't have laundry, a complete mess. And one of the areas was the issue of emergency medical services. One person said, "What, emergency medical services? We haven't even heard, don't even know. We've never seen an ambulance in our life." And that's a tragedy.
My sister was suffering from tuberculosis, and
the scissors were beginning, see. So we saw that he's going to die if she does not go to the hospital. The ambulance refused to come because they would attend only to the accidents and the wounded persons. So it took about 5 days for it to arrive. It arrived on the 6th day. And then the condition was too bad and he could not survive. She just died. This is a report by the Daily Sun. It was the picture that was taken on the Tuesday when they came. So what I did, I reported to the Human Rights Commission and the Department of Health.
We gave an opportunity to Mr. Xolisi Sam to present his story, his personal story, experience at the hearing, and then it was incorporated there in the report. There has been a commitment on the part of the department indicating that they will increase the fleet.
We are operating with 3 ambulances today. So the East London is big, as you can see now, all other ambulances are out. So we are the only ambulance that is available. We ought to be there. So we cannot just say we cannot go there because of the bad roads and everything. We go there in spite of everything.
In order for people to invoke the Constitution, they first of all have to know about it. And you'd be surprised how few people know about the Constitution 20 years after its promulgation. Secondly, they have to have access to legal services if they're to use the actual provisions in a court of law or even in a Chapter 9 institution to turn a right, whether it be food or housing or health or whatever, into a reality.
The homeland of the past is the most disadvantaged as we speak right now. When it comes to issues of equality, we are into almost 21 years into democracy. But inequality is just growing by the day. And as a commission, we are confronted by that situation to say, look, how do you make sure that every person is equal?
Money is not the problem, for the most part. When it comes to healthcare services, it's the mismanagement and just the kind of callous lack of concern for poor people's lives. You know, people have forgotten that there are names, that there are living human beings behind these tragic stories.
If the people know what their rights are, they will know when those rights are infringed.
So it's nice knowing when you go home that you've made a difference in someone's life. Because before the public sector, I was in the private sector. I had no clue what was happening out there.
Haholo ntho ene le bothata haholo ka nako ene le metsi ho sena metsi Fixburg nix and ha re botsa ma councilor ka nako eo ba re jwetsa hore re tlo bana le metsi the following year. So ke ntho na di members tsa committee le tse groupa hore ba tlo etsa march hore ba kope dithuso jalo masepaleng. Ke ha ke mo bona mo a palame vene a ba ngwivela fela tjenana a dumedisa a tsamaya. Ke the last time ne ke mo bona.
We had a service delivery protest, so we are just around here to come and hand over the memorandum. And then the situation really became volatile and violent. And then the marchers and then started throwing stones at the building here. So there was a scuffle between the police and Andres, and then from there, the next moment they shot him, and then he fell somewhere around here. And then from there, the ambulance took him to the hospital, but unfortunately, he lost his life.
It was an event that was captured by news cameras and shown on national television. As a body engaged with human rights and protection of constitutional rights, we took a decision to lay a formal complaint with the Human Rights Commission about the violations of Mr. Tatane's human rights and asking the Commission to investigate the circumstances of his death.
Although this matter had been investigated as a criminal matter, even as a civil matter, the Commission felt it was an extremely important pronouncement for us to speak to the human rights violations that had been undermined in that case.
Nna ho ya ka nna ha ke a kwatela maponesa ana manga o fela ba bang ke ba khotsi ba ka ke a qoqa le bona empa bao ba entseng ke tseo ke a gola modimo tla ntshwara bona ke kopa modimo fela o ka sebetse ka bona
be re kena ka mo ha ke kena ke se ke mothola hodima stretcher sa shwila sa hlokahetse ne ke tshwile ne ke ferekana ke tsebe.
We don't have water around here. And then basically that is what Andries was killed for, water.
There's no one in this country that has the responsibility of the police, where they have to own up in terms of their own human rights, but also having the responsibility of infringing the same human rights. There is the concern in society that law and order has really gone completely overboard. On the other hand, we want a firm law and order approach, a strong police force that can really show muscle and show that this government is in power.
The relationship between government and the citizen in the apartheid times was one of domination and repression. And in Dadane's case, what we saw again was that kind of repressive conduct of the state on defenseless citizens.
Mara at least to hoja government e ma le gone ya re bontsha hore ba re supporta case ga be re win ba tshwane ba le phoso ba tshwaruwe ba e tronkong ba punishiwe ba kusuwa ba punishiwe ba iso tronkong ne re tlo khothala le gona mare muso gona go faith ena ga sana tshepo duma ona go bohloko.
The findings that we issued in terms of the Dadane investigation were directed at improving policing in South Africa, recommendations that would lead to a better police force that is human rights oriented, to again, not so long after, to encounter the Marikana onslaught. There's still a lot to do in terms of policing in South Africa.
It is unfortunately reflective of the fact that there is an element of impunity insofar as the South African Police Service is concerned, that they feel that they are not accountable to Parliament or to the Human Rights Commission or to the public at large.
The extent to which we've had to use the Bill of Rights to protect people against police who shoot too often is scary. There have been clashes between students protesting and those police. And sure, the people who are being subjected to police harassment or that have got the Bill of Rights and they can rely on it by going to court. But there are times where one would hope that the educative nature of human rights would have travelled sufficiently far, be it through our police service or through other sectors of the state, that cases like that were no longer relevant.
Fees Must Fall was a wake-up call, and to tell you people can go so far and no further.
The Constitution gives people a right to basic education, everyone a right to basic education. It doesn't qualify that right in any way. It doesn't say you have a right to basic education dependent on available resources.
In 2012, there was a report that the children of Limpopo were not getting textbooks, did not have textbooks, the required textbooks at school.
Money was there, everything was there, and children had no books. How do you explain that?
Amongst the things we found was that there were schools that were not known by the Department of Education. They existed, but nobody had been there. Nobody seemed to know anything about them. We put together the proposal, which we forwarded to the Department of Basic Education. It's taken some time, but it's been well received. And we are now talking about how we are going to get this protocol on working and realized.
Failure to chase those rights has very severe consequences for ordinary people and for the future of this country, because if we continue to tolerate an education system like we have, then South Africa will burn.
Deprivation that affects adults has devastating consequences when it comes to children. And with children, the damage can be permanent.
We must learn from the past to prioritize things that are closer to the heart of the people. And to me, anybody who wants to invest in the future must do so on children, because our future is on children. You go to the rural areas, the schools there, mud schools, everything is still as bad. Why can't we prioritize those ones?
We are best placed to be able to bring together different stakeholders on an issue. And everybody understands that it's not a particular interest we are following. It's in the interest of all.
I think it was something that was ingrained in me from a young age to respect others and recognize the inherent dignity and the rights of another person.
I born 1926. I'm 88 years. I said to my children, I don't want to worry you, and I don't want to stay with you. I want you must get for me a home, old age home.
The whole idea behind the Older Persons Act is that there must be equity in service delivery in all the provinces to older persons, which is currently not the case. If there are complaints coming through to the Human Rights Commission, we do the investigations and then write reports, send it back to the Human Rights Commission and give input.
I have turned the Commission to look more into matters of disability. I am a commissioner here at the South African Human Rights Commission, charged with the responsibilities and focus area for disability and older persons.
We identified amongst the many human rights issues that potentially arise in the context of private business, the issue of the undermining of people with disabilities. And the Commission has looked into developing a toolkit that will assist business to comply with disability rights, to foster better conditions of employment for employees who live with disabilities.
Mimi nilitoka Kongo, nilikimbia ubakaji, na nilikimbia mauaji, yani nilikimbia insecurity. South Africa nilifika nikutosha tena ingine matatizo. Nilifaa tu mwezi mmoja tu hapa. Nilifaa mwezi mmoja hapa, mume wangu wakampa kisu. Mimi sijui tatizo wala sina tatizo hata moja mimi na wajirani yangu. Kisa ni juu tuko wakimbizi wa makwirikwiri, wanatuita wa makwirikwiri.
The Human Rights Commission was quite vocal about in 2008. And they analysed the causes of violence and xenophobic tensions, and they brought out a report in 2010. And had the government read that report and absorbed the meaning of it and implemented some of those strategies, then perhaps we wouldn't have seen a flare-up in 2015 on the same scale.
One of the key costs of democracy is that people from other parts of Africa will look at South Africa as a shining example of stability, economic opportunity, and will flock to South Africa. Now, when that happens, there's bound to be contestation for resources, for opportunities, and I dare say we were not prepared.
we have an incredible constitution which comes from an incredible history, and so much was put into the drafting of those provisions, and it's such a progressive document, yet it doesn't translate into reality. And when you have a constitution that builds in concepts of Chapter 9 institutions like the Human Rights Commission, the Public Protector, and so on, those mechanisms are there for a reason, and those mechanisms are there as a check and balance. And if the government is going to ignore them, then those checks and balances become ineffective.
It's not as though these issues are not known and understood, but always is a need for implementation. And clearly that's one area where the Human Rights Commission has to pay special attention, because you're dealing with people who are victims of marginalization and attack, are usually very poor, frequently can't speak the languages of South Africa, and what do they have left? They have left the claim to be human beings, to be treated with dignity, and for South Africa to accept its international responsibilities and very special responsibilities as an African country that got enormous support from Africa.
The enemies was coming to our house, the Mai in SAHRC, so they hit my father-in-law, they raped me. I need your help, seriously.
Sometimes we need to forget about ourselves and put ourselves in the lives of somebody living in an informal settlement, somebody who's displaced, somebody who cannot access education because the school is not accessible for children in wheelchairs.
Part of our introduction back into the community of nations was that we would have the opportunity to also be part of international treaties and conventions that support and protect human rights in this country. And there's a responsibility, therefore, for South Africa, once it has signed a treaty, to be seen to be living in a manner that is consistent with the obligations under this treaty.
People admire our constitution. We go across the globe. And for the past 3 years, for instance, we have been chairing an international committee that oversees national human rights institutions.
But also our country has signed the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, which means that we commit as a country to abide by what the international community has agreed upon.
We have opportunity at the regional level through African Union mechanisms to speak with authority on issues in the country at that level. We have opportunities at the UN level internationally to speak on issues that relate to South Africa and be heard and understood.
Court work and civil matters I enjoyed, but not as much as actually making a difference in the lives of people that don't have the means to get to an attorney to assist them.
Het eendag 'n prokureur gekom en vir my 'n brief gegee met 'n rooi geskryf wat vir my R650. Binne 7 dae moet ek R650 betaal. Ek het geskrik, ek weet nie wat ek kan doen nie.
This group of people had all approached the University of Stellenbosch Legal Aid Clinic with the same problem. They would arrive at the clinic and say, I have these deductions against my salary. I don't understand.
Die salaris is maar bietjie min, ek het gekry wat R1200 'n maand.
Ik heb die lenings gemaakt en ik heb geweet ik kan het niet aan afford, maar ik heb nog steeds het gemaakt om mijn huur te betalen.
Because it's become so easy to collect debts via emoluments attachment orders, the credit provider industry has become far more reckless in lending.
En ik heb voor hem gezegd, maar ik kan het niet bekostigen. Dat is onmogelijk. Ik weet ik schuld die mensen geld, maar ik kan niet zoveel betalen, ik is de enigste broodwinner.
If you have to consult with an attorney today, it will take you 1 week of your pay packet to pay for that consultation. Let alone going to court itself. Can you imagine how vulnerable the poor, the weak, and marginalized, and the downtrodden are?
So the Human Rights Commission explained to the court the mechanisms in which other countries control, monitor, and ensure that there's not an abuse of emoluments attachment orders.
Die 8de Julie het ons hele lewens, 15 applikante se lewens verander. En ek kan vir u sê dat ek het gehuil die dag. Ek het gehuil.
The court actually found in our favor and said that these microlenders need to be taken to task. The attorneys who acted for them must also be taken to task. It ordered that Parliament close the gaps in the laws that created this environment for these people to do what they did, to abuse the law, the legal process. And I thought that was an amazing case which had a strategic impact for the whole country.
You know, I love the Commission. I'm proud of being part of the Commission because we've really made a difference. We've really made changes.
David and I had an absolute love for the farming industry, for agriculture, and our vision was a massive dairy. Basically, the 4 guys came around that pole. David had always had this view of when your time has come, it will come. We were never really people that were crazy about safety, locking everything behind big gates and fences and things like that. Kom, sê hallo vir die tannie. Kom sê hallo vir die tannie. Kom sê hallo. There he is. David pushed me into the milking area. One guy pulled that door closed on me, and then David went out to talk to them, and they fought from the door here all the way up to that path, and then they came back basically to where that sprayer is standing, and that's where they shot David when he couldn't fight anymore, fighting with 4 men, how long can you last? And I remember pulling the door open and seeing David on his knees. And the next minute the shot went off. I then tried to get hold of David to try and wake him up, to tell him it's over. He didn't respond. No. Our courts, they are ruled by rules. They have to do things in a certain way, but they have to find different ways to work with farm attack victims.
Here we're about improving the lives of people through ensuring that everyone's rights are respected, and in line with the vision of the institution whereby we want to restore dignity and really transform our society.
Anyone can complain to us. We'll look objectively at the complaint, and we like to hear both sides of the stories.
One of the reasons why Chapter 9 institutions were established as independent institutions was so that they were able to say some of the hard things that need to be said to government, to civil society, even to business that is investing a lot of money in the country. And if things need to be said, it is Chapter 9 institutions that will say so.
What we have seen is that, especially with disused and closed mines, people are affected by the degradation of the environment and issues around acid mine drainage, which is the pollution of the water.
There were real concerns being raised by communities and small-scale farmers, medium-sized farmers along the West Rand, right up until Klerksdorp, about the problem of water supply being contaminated by acid mine drainage.
The Wonderfontein Spruit is already contaminated with elevated levels of cadmium, cobalt, copper, zinc, arsenic and uranium. From the West Rand alone, every day 42.24 tons of dust enter this environment, that is on average. In this area you will also notice that there are many residential developments, both formal and informal. They often plant their crops in the wetlands, and these wetlands contain elevated levels of metals, both toxic and radioactive.
people are living on top of a mine dump with no access to any services, with no jobs, 95% unemployment rate in a community of 1,800 people.
It's a violation or an infringement to the right of life, the right to sufficient water of sufficient quantity and quality. Many of these communities are ill-informed, undereducated regarding these risks, so it is also an infringement of the right to access to information.
Children have had a very difficult time in mining areas especially, not only through their parents who are not there, but also because they are affected during the time of operations. It's important that institutions like the Commission stand up for children and make sure that they give a voice to children. So the Commission is therefore looking at how the business practices are impacting negatively on the children. Of course, they can impact positively as well.
When it comes to gold mining, not all of our mineral wealth can consistently be mined, and there are going to be a lot of operations that are currently conducted by artisanal mining that's described as illegal mining.
There's no job around here. I'm not working anywhere. That's why I try to come here for myself. Today, maybe I'm going to have something like 300 or 400, 200. It's dangerous just because we are in mine. We are just trying just because there's nothing we can do.
So those are some of the areas that we want to make sure that government tightens the monitoring role and ensures that when mines come to the close of their business, that the rehabilitation is done and that people who are in the area do not suffer.
It is important for every citizen to want to be part of a bigger drive of ensuring that, there is change in South Africa, there is transformation.
You encounter people and it's easy to read about it and it's a textbook case and okay, this person is transgendered from male to female, whatever the case may be. And then you actually meet the individual and you sit with them and you realize, wow, this is a person.
They would say you don't have human rights because you're Mofi. They would strip me naked and they would say, that's what you have. That's what you have, and there would be children present.
I made a telephone call to an establishment in Wolseley, which is a small town near Ceres. And I said that I would like to find out about your accommodation. And then she said your name and everything, so I gave that, and she said, and Mrs. Sedgwick? So I said, no, there isn't a Mrs. Sedgwick. I said, it's going to be my partner. So she immediately said, oh, I'm terribly sorry, but we're not gay friendly. And I mentioned this whole issue to Neil that evening, and he nearly had a cadenza. He couldn't believe what I was telling him.
Subsequently, I was approached by the Human Rights Commission, and they offered their services. Their subsequent apology, which we got on the day, was part of a press release, and also they signed a non-discriminatory pledge, which basically means that in their personal business lives moving forward, they will conduct their business in line with the Constitution.
I've come from a background where I was bullied, and now being bullied and victimized and abused as an adult, it hurts. I'm entitled to wear long hair, that I'm entitled to date a guy. That's basically what I want. And I don't think it's far-fetched. I just want them to be informed and educated.
You are exposed to an environment which challenges every part of your thinking. And you find yourself going, can I reconcile this with my own thoughts or my own beliefs?
There's a richness in customary law that we connect with the term Ubuntu that is useful and valid not just for people living under rules that are derived from customary law, but for the whole of our society.
There are things such as circumcision, there are things such as ukutwala, there are things such as teenage brides, etc. that is conflicting with human rights. There are certain fundamental human rights that cannot be inferior to culture. But cultures in South Africa and worldwide are there to enrich us.
Customary law evolves, it's living, it's organic, it grows. And women in the rural areas are not simply passive victims of an unjust legal system. They are the first people speaking out against aspects of the traditional courts bill that they feel will be very oppressive.
In the South African context, traditional authorities have a special place. The Constitution did not outlaw or abolish these institutions. In recognizing these institutions, also recognized that the tension would exist for a period of time, that it would be the role of Chapter 9 institutions to almost broker those kind of conversations, to create platforms for progressively getting traditional authorities to understand, the need to merge traditional norms with democratic norms and human rights in particular.
As insignificant as it may seem to others, you were a part of changing a system, making the world a little bit better for someone else who had been disadvantaged for such a long time.
I am amazed at the amount of work that this institution has produced over 20 years of its existence. Mounds and mounds of recommendations and findings that are sitting, between the covers of reports, research reports, legal, investigative reports. I think the time has come for us to take stock of what we have recommended to government and begin to ask ourselves to what extent has government heeded to the recommendations of the Chapter 9 institution.
We need to take this 20 years as an opportunity to look back and make an assessment of what we're able to do, what is critical and outstanding, and how do we move forward. It can't be business as usual. Something needs to change. It's a clarion call to all of us as a commission and government.